All right, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time recording a video demo of Nexus Dashboard. This is a solution that I'm currently coming up to speed on, getting familiar with, and there is a ton of documentation. But what I really want to show in this video is that once the solution is deployed, the consumption of the solution is actually pretty simple. I'm not going to make the same claim that it's simple to get deployed. There's a lot of connectivity requirements, compatibility matrix type information, features and caveats, and you name it that you need to get through to get to this point. But yeah, I want to show more of the ultimate value prop, the solution. So when you first log into Nexus Dashboard, keep in mind, right, Nexus Dashboard is a platform. It is a clustered hardware and software platform that's meant to host multiple services or applications. And we can see one of those services down here at the bottom. Multi-site orchestrator is a service or application that runs on top of the Nexus Dashboard platform. So when you first log in, you see a summary of sites that Nexus Dashboard applications are managing, and there are none, right? Because this is a brand new cluster. Ultimately, you would actually have no services either. It's just that I'm leveraging dcloud for this recording, this demo, so that's application's already been deployed. So anyway, we'll come back to this after we add some sites, but the dashboard shows you a summary of sites and services, two main concepts that you will see echoed here in the navigation that really drive the entire consumption of Nexus Dashboard. On the System Overview tab, up at the top, you get an idea of your system status. The system in this case is referring to the Nexus Dashboard cluster itself, and over here we can see the cluster health is okay. The cluster is not integrated with Nexus, with Intersight, but it can be in the typical fashion. If you come down under Infrastructure, Intersight, you can get your device ID and claim code and make a claim from Intersight to integrate these two solutions. You'll be taken to that same screen here with Setup Intersight. In the next tile here, you see sites and apps or services. So this is again referring to the services that you can host on the platform, as well as infrastructure services that are needed to basically run Nexus Dashboard. So you can think of these as backing services. Down here at the bottom, you've got your inventory, and this makes reference to nodes, pods, deployments, stateful sets, daemon sets. If you're familiar, all of these are in reference to Kubernetes concepts. So the Nexus Dashboard hardware is loaded with an operating system that runs Kubernetes, and Kubernetes runs all of the container microservices needed to run the Nexus Dashboard software. Okay, and that is the UI that we're currently looking at, the Nexus Dashboard software. And we see some basic, storage, CPU, memory utilization type statistics down at the bottom. The next tab is sites. So here you can add a site, and here we're going to say San Francisco, and we put a cloud.cisco.com, and user and passwords. We're going to go ahead and add that site. It takes a minute for it to pop into the GUI. Or maybe I missed a step. Cancel and find out. Let's do a refresh. There it is, popped up. Connectivity status is unknown. Sometimes it can take a couple minutes for that to update. We're also going to add a second site here called New York, which is 1B, cloud.cisco.com. And we'll add that second site, and we'll wait a few minutes while I go through the rest of the UI to come back and take a look at this. Also, now that we've added our sites, actually one thing that we can do, okay, so San Francisco just came, connectivity status is up. If I edit this site, see if I can edit it. edit. Yeah, you can drop a geographical pin on the map. So since this is San Francisco, I'm going to put that over here on the left of the United States and save it. And then I'm going to do the same thing here with New York. Put that on the East Coast and save it. And if I go back to the dashboard, then we can see San Francisco on the left, New York on the right. Okay, so we have our sites, we have our services, and now both sites are reporting an up status, what firmware version they're running, what services are being used by those sites. And currently, since we haven't got to services yet, these sites were just configured. They're not using any of the services. So next we move on to services. So if this were truly a brand new cluster, as I was suggesting, then you wouldn't see multi-site orchestrator here. You would just see the service catalog. So you can come into the service catalog, look in the App Store. As long as your Nexus dashboard has internet access, you can reach out to our App Store and you can find a tile that represents the various applications that run on Nexus dashboard. There are 4. The first one is Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator, which is currently installed, although it looks like there's a newer version that we're able to update. Nexus Dashboard Insights, Nexus Dashboard Data Broker, and Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. Now, why we're not seeing Data Broker or Fabric Controller here, I'm not positive. It could be that those require a download from Cisco's software site and then manual upload. But this idea that you can install and update from within the App Store points to the fact that Nexus Dashboard is a consolidated location for multiple network management applications, so that we can lifecycle manage those applications. So install, update, remove, etc. And it also provides common services like DNS and NTP to each of the applications that run on it. And it also provides third-party integration capability for things like Ansible and Terraform and Splunk and ServiceNow that each of the applications can benefit from also, and in a way where each application doesn't have to be configured independently for each of those services or integrations. I mentioned manual upload here a minute ago, so if you go to installed services and actions, you can upload an app, and that's how you would do basically a manual install. If the download is required manually, or perhaps if Nexus Dashboard doesn't have internet access, you can download those files and bring them to a laptop that has access to Nexus Dashboard and manually upload them here. So once it's installed, you enable the service. So you would do that here. You can also restart the service if you need to. And then, the shortcut shows up underneath services for multi-site orchestrator because it is installed, it is enabled, and now we can actually click this little flyout button and it will open up the multi-site orchestrator application in a new browser tab. Okay, we're gonna go through this in a minute or in a separate video. Okay, so that's basically how services get installed, how sites get created. Now, with multi-site orchestrator, let me go back to that tab actually. What have I got here? Here we go. So, we added sites to Nexus Dashboard, and then we added a service to Nexus Dashboard, but the service isn't really connected to the sites. So that's what you have to do inside of, in this example, multi-site orchestrator or Nexus Dashboard orchestrator. So in MSO or NDO, if you go under infrastructure and click on sites, then what you'll see is the 2 sites that were added at a platform layer over here, but you can see that Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator isn't currently managing those sites. The state shows unmanaged. So all we need to do is change San Francisco to managed and give it a unique site ID for multi-site capability. And so that would be site 1, and then we'll change New York, and we'll call that site 2. And now each of them has a unique site ID, and we'll show managed here in just a minute. Okay, we'll come back and we'll check on that in a moment. So again, you can have multiple different applications 4 different applications: NDO, NDI, NDDB, and NDFC. Probably wind up creating separate videos for each of those in the future. All right, so that's pretty much what happens under services. Under system resources, again, the underlying system, operating system, is running Kubernetes software, which hosts Nexus Dashboard software on top of it. And so all of the terminology that you see here is related to Kubernetes running on our physical or virtual Nexus Dashboard cluster nodes. So these would be those nodes. In this case, I believe this is a virtual Nexus Dashboard running Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. And so that's why we only have one node in our cluster. There's data network IP and management network IP. This has to do with the network connectivity that each Nexus Dashboard has to have. Typically, the management network is used for GUI access, like we have here, CLI access, API access, etc. Can also be used for things like DNS and NTP and other types of management traffic. And then the data network address is where Nexus Dashboard connects to the fabrics that it is managing, or the, in the case of ACI, this would either be the spine and leaf switches or the apex. For NDO, it's really the apex. For NDI, it's more the actual fabric nodes, because we want to collect telemetry data from all those nodes. So we see pods, and so here you'll see all the different application pods and basically services that make up the Nexus Dashboard application. So I don't really see us leveraging system resources on a daily basis. That's really not going to be practical daily use in IT operations, but where that would come in useful is if TAC were trying to troubleshoot the Nexus Dashboard app itself. Under operations, let's go to operations. This is talking about operations for the Nexus Dashboard platform itself. So we've got firmware management. So if you wanted to update Nexus Dashboard software on the platform itself, independent of the services and the service catalog and the app center that we saw there, this is where you would do it. So you could download the software onto your laptop, you could come to images, you can add an image, upload it to the platform, and then you can set up your update to basically update this version of firmware to something more recent. If you need to collect tech support data, you can go under tech support, collect tech support data, you can delete that data to save space on the system. You can check your audit logs, which tracks who did what, where, and when. And you can do system backup and restore operations from here. You can create your backup job over here. You can restore your backup job based on what has been stored on the system. That pretty much covers the operations. Under infrastructure, you have the cluster configuration. So these are what I would consider cluster-wide configurations. So keep in mind, in a true Nexus Dashboard platform, you've got multiple cluster nodes, and each of them participate in an app subnet and a service subnet. Essentially, these subnets are never routed on the upstream network. This is how the different containers running on the cluster nodes communicate with each other across the nodes. So what happens is the traffic in these subnets exits the data interface, but it's VXLAN encapsulated, and then it just travels across that subnet, the data interface subnet, to an adjacent Nexus Dashboard node, which de-encapsulates VXLAN and forwards traffic on to the other microservice. So essentially, the app subnet and service subnets are how different containers for different applications that are running across different Nexus Dashboard cluster nodes communicate with each other. We also have proxy configurations, NTP, DNS, routes, external service pools. External service pools have, I think, something to do with assigning static IPs or persistent IPs for services needed for, let's say, NDFC, things like syslog, etc. But the idea on this page is that all of the settings on this page apply cluster-wide. So you don't have to configure NTP individually on each cluster node. You do it once here, and it applies to all the nodes. In terms of resource utilization, again, I think this is more trying to understand the state of your overall Kubernetes cluster, memory utilization, etc. You can see up here that we're currently looking at all nodes, and we could limit that down to a single node to see how that node is performing. We're also looking at all namespaces, but we could look at a particular namespace to see how resources are being used for apps running in that namespace. So again, I think this is more useful for troubleshooting the Nexus dashboard, cluster nodes, understanding resource utilization, and maybe troubleshooting apps through Cisco TAC. Intersite we already covered. Application infrastructure services, so these are sort of like underlying services like we can see here, Kafka, MongoDB. This is obviously the Intersite device connector that we get the device ID and the claim code from right here. So these are like underlying infrastructure services that help the Nexus dashboard platform run, other than maybe taking a service and restarting it. There's not a whole lot that you can do here. You can see the version of the services, and I think this would also come into use when troubleshooting the platform. And then finally, under administrative, this really has to do with everything to do with users. So you can configure local users, you can configure remote users, or you would inherit remote users. If you can create a remote login domain and maybe point at an LDAP server, you would see those users here. When you create a local user, you have to define roles. I would suggest that you read up and understand these different types of roles to give a basic idea. If you want someone who logs into Nexus dashboard to be able to add sites like we just did earlier in the demo, then they would need the site administrator write privilege. If you then wanted a user to be able to manage those sites using a service or application like Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator that's running on the platform, then they would need site manager write privileges. And if we want them to be able to manage tenant policy, then they would need this here. So anyway, read up and understand these different roles so that you can make sure that the right people have access to manage the right resources. Under security, these are basically the self-signed certificate that's installed in the system by default. Looks like you can replace that with your own certificate. And then under authentication, you can configure additional login domains. So this is where you can create, like Radius or TACAX or LDAP connectivity and authenticate against those systems and potentially gain view into the remote users on those systems under this other tab. Okay, so that pretty much covers the basic navigation of the system. Again, I think it's pretty straightforward. The main things that you need to be concerned with are going to be the dashboard view, adding sites, adding services, and then integrating the services with the sites so that you can then manage them per the functionality that is offered from each of the services or applications that run on the platform. Other than that, I think it's going to come down to inter-site connectivity, cluster configuration, service catalog for application lifecycle management, and then basically everything that's done through these flyout menus to say like multi-site orchestrator. So I'm going to go ahead and terminate this video, but then I'm going to pick it right up again in a separate video to cover multi-site orchestrator. Thanks for watching.